Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be discussing why many console Fortnite players should raise their sensitivity. As I'm sure you guys are well aware, sensitivity is always a very hot topic in Fortnite, and choosing between raising and lowering your sense in certain categories is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think that's especially true on console because there's just less top players to refer to compared to controller on PC. However, whenever somebody's struggling with their sensitivity, the advice that people will usually give is almost always to lower it. I totally understand why, I've said that a few times myself on this channel, and as a whole, it's usually pretty solid advice. But lowering your sensitivity isn't always the right answer. Sometimes you may feel uncomfortable with your current sensitivity, but not because it's too high, actually because it's too low. So what I'm going to do in this video is go to each sensitivity category and explain the positives that not enough people consider that raising your sensitivity would provide to you. I don't think it'll appeal to everybody, but I think it'll definitely help a lot of you guys. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so we're going to start this off by talking about the first category when you open the sensitivity menu, which is look/non-ADS sensitivity. So when it comes to look sensitivity, here's what I'd say are the positives of making your sensitivity higher. Right now, a lot of the most important engagements in Fortnite, especially on console, are occurring at point-blank range. And the reason for that is fairly simple. The closer you are to your enemy, the easier it's going to be to hit shots, and when it comes to weapons like shotguns, you're also going to be dealing more damage per bullet hit. Also, this meshes really well with both linear and exponential because they give an insane amount of aim assist if you're right in your enemy's face. Now, I think almost everybody would agree that as a whole that's a good thing, but there's also a negative side to it that many people don't even consider. As soon as you put any amount of your crosshair anywhere on the enemy, your sensitivity is going to slow down so much. It basically feels like you're trying to drag it through quicksand or something. So if your crosshair starts off on a bad part of the enemy's body, maybe the bottom of their leg or end of their arm, that's actually going to be really bad. Since you're starting on the outskirts of the player model, you're going to be prone to misses if they move at all. It's going to take forever for you to move your crosshair to the middle of their body, and it's going to be basically impossible to flick up and hit a headshot. Here's a small section of a full clip that I've shown before on this channel that gives a nice example of that exact point.
And mind you, if you're playing like me, controller against PC players all the time, they can easily flick up to my head. I can't do it to them though because the aim assist slowdown is so much that, like, look, let me give you an example. So just this amount of time that it takes me to get to his head, going as fast as I can, just that amount of time is that important.
So one of the ways that you can sort of mitigate that linear/expo stickiness actually hurting you in certain situations is by using a higher look sensitivity. The tracking assist that you get when you put your crosshair on an enemy is still going to be super strong no matter what sense you use, but at the same time, when you use a higher value, you're able to reposition it a little better if your crosshair starts off on a bad part of the body, and also when you're lucky enough to start on the chest or near the middle, you'll also be able to flick up for headshots a lot better. The other positive of using a higher look sensitivity right now is that it fits the current weapon meta of the game slightly better. With spray weapons like the SMGs, miniguns, and tac shotguns, which are all super powerful right now, it isn't a huge deal if you miss a shot or two as long as you're continually spraying and tracking. So if you run into a guy's box and he's jumping around everywhere and maybe you're strafing or crouching at the same time, a higher look sense is probably the better option in that situation as long as your aim isn't terrible. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to track a player with your crosshair who's moving faster than your sensitivity can follow. And there are definitely some really good console and controller players that use pretty high look sensitivities. I know Astonish is in the high 40s for both both horizontal and vertical. I believe Bizix in the 50s for both, and just to mention one or two controller on PC guys, I know Unknown Army is like 5348, and the craziest one by far is CRR. He uses 75 horizontal and 71 vertical, but that's definitely a bit of an outlier, and I would not suggest copying that. Also, it's really important to remember that look sensitivity is highly impacted by whether or not you use linear and also your look dampening time. Let's just say you're using 45-45 for horizontal and vertical look sensitivity. You may be thinking, oh well, my values are pretty high as it is, so I definitely don't need to raise them. Well, if you're a linear player with a relatively normal look dampening time, that's probably true, but if you're on Expo with a default 0.2 second look dampening time, for example, 45-45 may actually be pretty low, so make sure you take that into consideration. The next sensitivity category is ADS sensitivity, and this is a really interesting but also frustrating one to discuss, and you'll see why soon enough. So when it comes to the advantage of using a low ADS sensitivity, it's fairly obvious why you'd want to do that. You're going to be a lot more accurate with ARs in medium to long range fights, and I believe that's really important on linear and Expo because AR aim is pretty hard on those settings, at least compared to what it was like on Legacy. However, there's one negative to using a low ADS sense that makes it not as much of a no-brainer decision as you might think. Since for some apparent reason Epic isn't making scope sensitivity an option on linear or Expo, whenever you use a sniper, it moves at the speed of your ADS sensitivity. And since most people use really low values, I'd say the average is about 10 or 11%, trying to snipe with something that low is honestly a pretty miserable experience. It almost makes snipers totally unusable as a whole because even players who are just walking move faster than your scope does, and if they start jumping or sprinting, you may as well just give up at that point. Now, it's not like raising your ADS sensitivity a few percentage is gonna totally change that, but you gotta realize that when you're dealing with such small numbers, the difference between, say, 14% and 10% is actually pretty big. So I definitely wouldn't recommend going to like 20% just because you want to be a sniping goon, but if you're someone that does snipe a lot, bumping up your ADS sensitivity by a few percentage points probably won't kill your AR aim, and it also makes sniping so much more viable. The next sensitivity category is building and editing sense, and unlike with look sensitivity, I feel like the argument to raise these values is a lot more straightforward and easy to make. Don't get me wrong, your first priority with building and editing sense should be your comfort level with the values, but you should almost always be looking to raise them because speed is so much more important with those mechanics compared to aim. However, another common sensitivity mistake that people make is forgetting that even on linear and exponential, building and editing sensitivity is still a multiplier of your look sensitivity. So because of that, you can't just look at those values on their own. You may think that your editing sensitivity is super high because it's 2.5 when most people use 2 to 2.2 or so, but if your look horizontal and vertical speed is something like 30%, your editing sensitivity is only 75%, which is relatively low. Most good console players are usually at around 90%, but there are definitely some outliers. Just to throw out a few random examples, Twexy is at 105% for building and editing, Nutify is at about 107%, but on the other end of the spectrum, you have Bizix, who's only at 75%. And if that variation sounds crazy, some of the controller on PC guys are even wilder. For example, Lecce is all the way up at 120%, and I don't even know how this is possible, but CRR is at 160%. So clearly, a lot of these top players love a high building and editing sensitivity. And the final way of increasing your sensitivity that I want to talk about is look dampening time. It's a bit of an odd one because the lower you make that value, the higher your sensitivity becomes, but I'm sure you guys already knew that. The argument for lowering your look dampening time is again a pretty easy one to make. It decreases your aim acceleration, which gives you more control over your aim as a whole, and also makes it easier to build muscle memory, which will improve your aim more in the long run. And if you take a look at the top console and PC on controller guys, a ton of them use the lowest look dampening time possible, which is 0.00. If you're on anything under maybe 0.05 or so, the difference between that is definitely small, but even so, I think your end goal over time should be to gradually lower it until you get all the way down to that 0.00 mark. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. Let me know whether you plan on increasing any of your sensitivity values after watching this video, or are you just gonna stay put? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.